I am Katie, and I am one of the other osteologists from the site. Um, so I feel like this is a piece of one of the finds from site that people are a little bit excited to hear about because it has been quite a mystery. So we found this bottle in the grave context of one of our individuals on the site, and really we're just going to talk about what it is and why it was there. The individual was buried at Trinity Burial Ground from 1783 to 1861, which is the length of this burial ground. They were buried in a stack in the supine position, arms by the sides, legs straight and facing upwards, west to east, which is common this time, and also it is also common for stack burials where multiple individuals will be buried in a stack. The only material we found in this burial was the Hull Infirmary glass bottle between the lower legs, and it is likely that this was found in the context of the grave, placed deliberately with that individual, rather than as backfill, which you often find bits of detritus buried in the backfill, like pipe stems and other things like that. But this one, as you see in the photo, it looks to have been placed deliberately. Skeleton is in good condition. After the trees are planted along it, and that means that the rooting has affected the cemetery quite a lot. As you can see here, this skeleton was missing their right arm, unfortunately, probably due to the root going through. We had all the bits, however, needed to age and sex the individual. So we found, you'll see the lovely diagram what you do in the lab here. We colour this all in and show all of the bits that we have present and that are missing. So we do have our pelvis and skull, where all the important characteristics are. And this individual was a woman, and she was likely over 60 years old at time of death. She had a couple of pathologies, diseases at the time that she died, likely residual rickets. Rickets is a childhood disease where you don't have enough vitamin D, where it causes the bowing of your legs, significantly in her lower leg. We also had osteoporosis, which is a common disease for people getting a little older who lose density in their bones. Just general non-specific infection and general joint disease, which are all aging related. This is where she was buried in the grounds. So you'll see we've got the whole ground here with quite a lot of skeleton. She's kind of in the middle. Show you a little bit closer. You'll see the very delimited lines. She was in one of these very straight lines in a burial stack. So the bottle. This is actually quoting Lauren, who is in the lab this evening. We found this sealed bottle full of a mysterious brown liquid that is uncontaminated. It looks to have been very deliberately in the grave, and it is sealed and says Hull Infirmary on the side. So we here deal with the skeletons. We actually sent this off to Nottingham Trent University to be dealt with by David Belton and David Kilgore, who are specialists in this kind of technique. So we tried to do non-invasive techniques. We didn't want to really go into the bottle. Unfortunately, because it was sealed, we had to go for slightly more invasive techniques to kind of see what it was. So there's a lot of techniques on the board here. I won't go into detail. However, we did some inductively coupled mass spectrometry. We did some gas chromatography and some liquid chromatography. So these were taking the liquid out of the bottle and having a look at it under some of these quite high-tech looking machines that we've got over here. We found a lot of information from this. So following our main elemental mass spectrometry, we found that the liquid in the bottle was made up of sodium, potassium, and phosphorus. So following that initial discovery, we decided we needed to know a bit more. And then we did our liquid chromatography to see if there were any pharmaceutical materials within the liquid. Also, at the same time as we discovered this, they had taken the cork out and realized there was plant material potentially on the inside, and so it may not have been as uncontaminated as we thought. So there were a lot of tests going on using a scanning electron microscope again to see whether the plant matter had actually caused this bottle to be contaminated. It was not contaminated. It had just grown close around. We still have the exact liquid that went in coming out. So following that discovery, we could then look at a dried drop of the liquid through a couple of machines, energy dispersive X-ray analysis, and that confirmed our initial screening of the 3 sodium, potassium, and phosphorus. And it actually showed us that there were no pharmacological contents, so no medical contents. However, there was a sediment in the liquid. Through testing, it was obvious that this liquid was crystals of calcium phosphate and magnesium ammonium phosphate, so 2 phosphates. These are very characteristic of urine. So we've left the liquid with Nottingham Trent. They're going to do a lot more testing to see if it actually is urine, because they are characteristic of urine, but at this point, it's very early in the process. And then we have been left with looking at the archaeological interpretation. If it is urine, why? If it's not, what else could it possibly be based on the chemicals in the bottle? Specifically talking about medicine, the bottle could actually still have been medicine. This paper here on the screen was written in 1880 and published in the British Medical Journal by Dr. Frederick Churchill, basically talking about the value of phosphate and phosphorus material in 19th century medicines and or tonics. So tonics, for example, Coca-Cola, you see I put on the board. We've also got cherry phosphate, which is a kind of phosphate-based soft drink, or up in the top corner, acid phosphate, Horsford's acid phosphate, which is a little later than our site, but is one of the phosphate tonics, which is a soft drink and or medical tonic. So there are phosphate-based soft drinks that you could drink. For example, this one, which you can actually buy today. It is quite commonly used today in cocktails, but back in the day, it was just a soft drink and or a medical tonic. A French doctor, John Francis Churchill, used it to combat tuberculosis, suggesting that because you have TB, you are missing something and you cannot intake oxygen. And so by taking in phosphate through liquid medicine tonic, you could then fight and produce your own oxygen and defend against TB, basically. At this point, they did a Benedict's test on the liquid to see whether it had any of the sugars that would maybe be present in a soft drink. They actually didn't show any sugar. It did show us a significant amount of carbonate and bicarbonates, which actually kind of leads more towards the urine, but also could be present in a tonic. Here on the screen are some witch bottles, a different example that could have been what this bottle was if it were urine. So witch bottles, this one here dates from the 19th century, so it is from Northampton, around about the time of our site. Some of them are based from much earlier, in the 17th century. This was a witch bottle found by a metal detector in a forest. He actually put it back because he was a little terrified of it, which is very fair enough. Basically, a witch bottle is a glass or ceramic or stoneware vessel filled with urine, nail clippings, thorns, hair, to ward off witchcraft or evil spirits, and to prepare. It's a prepared cure. They have been found in a number of archaeological contexts, in houses, in cemeteries, under fireplaces. So this is actually another possibility of what it could be. So medicines, soft drinks, witch bottles, and actually that's kind of where we're left. We pop on to the next slide. It basically leaves us with this lovely long list of unanswered questions. If it is urine, why? If it's not urine, is it a soft drink? Is it a medicine? Why was it buried with this individual? And we have got a lot of further analysis currently going.
So if anybody has any questions for Katie, Please do type those into Q&A. We do have one here already from Tracy Dahlman. She says, Katie, is it common for people to be buried with objects?
Actually, it's fairly uncommon in this period in a general practice, which is why it's actually more interesting when you find individuals who have been buried with grave goods. So quite often the finds we have at this site with individuals are buttons or evidence of clothing or things they were wearing, and not so much specifically buried with items. You do kind of sometimes get like wedding rings, but they are again more things you would be wearing. To be buried with an item specifically placed with your burial is actually kind of unusual, which is, I think, why it's more interesting, because why has this person then been buried specifically with something instead of something they were just wearing as at the time of death and buried next in.
I should say that we have actually had a few people buried with plates, like ceramic dinner plates. And I know that there are other similar post-medieval burial grounds elsewhere in the country where they found those. So a new station in those, weren't they?
Yeah, we would find quite often actually in the same place on the lower leg in other post-medieval burial grounds to get plates. I think the only other thing off the top of my head I can think of is coins. People get buried with coins, and they have been placed deliberately either over the eye, which is the kind of Roman adopted into the post-medieval, was holding placed in pocket areas as well.
Yeah, the plates. We also think a sort of warding off evil thing. The plates apparently should have had salt put on them, and then they're put in the grave for the person to ward away evil spirits and such like.
It's quite a superstitious time, so
and not perhaps what you expect from a Christian burial ground.
No.